This episode is part of a series that's been made possible with financial assistance from the West Virginia Humanities Council, a state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities.
We're on the record, Kanawha County, West Virginia.
Last December, I went to sit in on the preliminary hearing for a trial that happened in my hometown.
State of West Virginia versus William R. Pulliam.
I've never been to a hearing like this before. I usually cover arts, culture, and education, not crime.
Your Honor, this is a murder case. My client is facing the rest of his life in prison.
But the story of this killing really struck me somewhere deep. So I squeeze into the jury box with some other local reporters.
The state has no business telling us how to investigate our case.
On one side are a few family members of the victim, James Means. The oldest brother, Antoine Means, leans heavily on the wooden railing that divides the courtroom. He stares straight ahead. Dark bags shadow his eyes. His face is the epitome of grief.
What kind of video surveillance is
The attorney for the state, Mary Claire Akers, questions Detective Chris Leoy. The detective explains that he spoke with witnesses and then heard that there was a video of the shooting, captured by a surveillance camera at a home nearby.
And once you viewed that video, did you develop a suspect from that video?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was the suspect developed from that video?
It ended up being Mr. William Pullman.
Is Mr. Pulliam in this room today?
Yes, ma'am.
William Pulliam sits at a wooden table. He's an older man, in his early 60s, with a round bald spot on top of his head. He's wearing an orange work jacket, orange socks, and thin brown shower slippers. There are shackles around his hands and feet. He's got this "how did I get here" look on his face.
Yes, ma'am.
Almost seems annoyed.
What did you see on the video?
I observed one individual, which ended up being the suspect, crossing the street. The victim, which was identified as James Means, standing on the north side of Washington Street.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the podcast that tells stories from America's cultural divides. I'm Trey Kay. So here's what we know. On November 21st, 2016, William Pulliam goes to the Dollar General store down the street from his apartment. Outside the store, he has some kind of argument with a group of kids. And when he's walking back home, he again has words with the same group of young men sitting on a porch. One of those young men is James Means. Pulliam crosses the street and heads home. James follows him, allegedly with a BB gun tucked into his waistband.
This BB gun that was found, can you describe the gun?
It was like a black handgun.
Okay. So it looked like a real gun?
Yes.
Pulliam is nearly home, but then he turns back and walks to face James Means. The neighborhood camera picks up what happens next.
James Means had nothing in his hands, and I observed Mr. Pullman pull out a gun and discharge one round. James Means then falls to the ground. As he gets up, William Pullman fires another round.
This time, Pulliam shoots James in the back. After Pulliam was arrested, the police report notes that he confessed to shooting James Means. And then he said to the arresting officer, "The way I look at it, that's another piece of trash off the street." A 62-year-old white man shoots a 15-year-old black kid. It immediately made me think of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old African-American boy who was playing with a toy gun outside of a rec center in Cleveland when police fatally shot him back in 2014. And then there's Trayvon Martin, the unarmed 17-year-old black kid in a gray hoodie who was killed in Florida by a neighborhood watch volunteer. The ghosts of these racially charged incidents, which have visited cities throughout the nation, seem to have shown up in my hometown of Charleston, West Virginia. Was this part of that epidemic? Or was this, as William Pulliam claims, a man defending himself? Either way, I wondered, could this shooting teach me anything new about race relations in the city where I grew up? Who is William Pulliam? What led him to take such a vicious action? And what about James Means, the kid he shot? who was he in his short life? I drive over to Pulliam's old neighborhood, where the crime took place. His apartment is located on the east end of Charleston.
He was our neighbor of 2 houses down for 5 years.
He seemed pretty friendly, but kind of kept to himself.
This is Gabrielle DeHalia and her husband, Todd Jarrett. Did you engage in conversation with him? Or?
I never did. I mean, no more than the general pleasantries of just, have a good day kind of thing.
I did, but it was about his cat Tux, who is a 17-pound behemoth cat. And when we would walk our dogs by, I would be like, "Hey, how's your cat?" And the cat was always very friendly, and he would be like, "How are your dogs?"
DeHalia says that Pulliam was a conscientious neighbor. He would mow the grass regularly, and he would tell them beforehand so they could move their cars to get out of the way of the grass shavings. When the shooting happened, DeHalia and Jarrett said they were shocked. DeHalia says she thought Pulliam was just a lonely old man. Jarrett says he never imagined that his neighbor would shoot a kid. When the police searched Pulliam's apartment, they found his cat, and DeHalia and Jarrett volunteered to take him.
The landlord and the officers brought over this huge trunk box of toys and food and all of this stuff for this cat. So we realized, he loved this cat. He loved this cat.
It strikes me that no one else in Pulliam's life came to take care of the cat. I called his ex-wife. She said that she has worked really hard to get away from Pulliam and has put those years behind her. I reached out to his daughter, his son, his sister, and even his ex-brother-in-law. None of them responded to my request for an interview. DeHalia says I should get in touch with Billy Joe Payton, that he knew Pulliam and owned the building where he lived.
The way I found out, I was preparing to go to work, turn on the news every morning and watch it. And they had a grainy video of the alleged shooter of the incident, and I told my wife, "Boy, that looks a lot like Bill Pulliam," half joking.
According to the criminal complaint, Pulliam expressed no remorse, saying, "The way I look at it, that's another piece of trash off the street." He later denied saying that.
And the next report I saw is that William Pulliam had been arrested, and I was stunned, but not in terms of the racist rant. Perhaps a man that had racist tendencies. I never would have dreamt that Bill would have done that, but again, it's not completely a surprise, I guess.
Billy Joe Payton has known Pulliam since elementary school. Then, about 10 years ago, Payton needed some work done around his house, and he hired Pulliam. He calls him Bill. Payton says he built a porch, redid a ceiling, and a bunch of odd jobs around the house over the years.
I got to know Bill pretty well. I trusted him to the point where I would give him a key, and if we weren't home, he came in and worked and locked up when he left. So, yeah, we didn't pal around outside the workplace, but I got to know him, I thought, fairly well over the course of the years.
Then, a few years ago, Payton bought a piece of property on East Washington Street. He planned to run a business out of the first floor and rent the upstairs apartment. So Payton hired Pulliam to fix up the new place.
And I'm guessing, and these are all approximate dates, maybe 5 years or so ago. It seems like a series of bad things were happening to Bill.
His tools were stolen, Payton says, and Pulliam had health problems, which included being diabetic.
I sensed that he was having trouble at home. He shared some things with me, that he was having some domestic problems.
Payton says Pulliam told him that he was angry with his daughter for hanging out with a, quote, bad crowd. But I heard that Pulliam had more complex legal problems with his wife and daughter. So I went down to the courthouse and pulled his file. There's a complaint in a domestic abuse case. I asked Payton to read it.
The complaint says, on the above date, the defendant struck his daughter with a closed fist several times in the face, kicked his daughter in the stomach, and the daughter is currently pregnant. And he also shoved his wife to the ground. The wife was bleeding, and the daughter had visible bruising to her left eye. and bleeding from the lip. That's very serious, obviously. That's not the story that Bill had told me.
Pulliam pleaded no contest to a domestic battery charge. That's basically accepting a conviction without admitting guilt. Payton said he didn't know any of this. He saw Pulliam as a normal guy who was down on his luck. So he let Pulliam stay in the upstairs apartment in the building he was rehabbing. And he didn't charge him rent. And that's where Pulliam was living when he shot James Means.
James was everything to me.
This is James Means' mother, Nafia Atkins. She tells me to call her Faye. I meet Faye one afternoon in the living room of a mutual friend, Deanna McKinney, another mom who lost her son to gun violence. As we talk, every now and again, Faye stops speaking. She cradles her face gently in her hand and winces in pain. She says she has mini strokes from all the stress she's been going through. She's lost her house to a fire. Her other sons are facing legal problems. And she's still grieving the death of James. It's a lot. James was born with only one lung and one kidney. So Faye says he wasn't tough and roughhousey like other kids.
He was more like a mama's boy. James did everything. Mama, you need me to do this. Mama, you need me to help you with this. He would help clean. He would cook. He would take his sisters and brothers to school.
The Means family is big and close. James has a lot of cousins, and they hung out together so often that they were more like brothers and sisters. I go to meet some of his cousins one day. About 7 of them are hanging out on Faye's sister's porch.
I'm Sante Means, and I'm James Means' cousin.
Sante is 15, the same age as James. She's tall and thin with a disarming smile.
I've been asking everybody, what are memories of James? What do you remember? You're smiling.
I'm smiling because I remember one night he stayed the night of our house. And
I heard he stayed over here a lot.
Yeah, he did.
Sante remembers that he spent the night over at their house after a birthday party. They all slept on a blow-up bed in the dining room.
He woke us up and was like, "Y'all hungry?" And I was like, "No." He was like, "You see that bread on top of the refrigerator? I'm about to go make me some barber bread." I said, "What is barber bread?" He said, "It's barbecue and bread." And I said, "I don't want any, no thanks." And then I actually tried it. It was actually good.
So what is it, white bread with barbecue sauce?
Yeah.
Everything that he ate was bread. It was he just.
These funny stories get mixed in with the details the kids know about James' death. Several of them had seen a Snapchat video that James' companions somehow recorded showing James just after he was shot. I'm struck with how the kids move back and forth between laughter and sadness, holding on to the image of James and the barber bread in one instant, and the bleeding James on the ground in the next. James was in the 9th grade when he died. So I'd go in search of teachers who had James over the years, who maybe knew parts of him that his family didn't see.
James, he was the young one. He was the small one. He wanted to fit in. He wanted to belong. So he was more so a follower.
This is Katrina Helm. She was James' teacher from the 3rd to the 5th grade. She was his favorite teacher. Helm taught special ed. When she met James in the 3rd grade, he could barely read. He had ADHD, so he had trouble settling down without medication. They worked together for hours, sounding out words and spelling. On the weekends, Katrina would take James and other students to the movies or the circus.
I just wanted to expose them to other things.
She knew James' mom, Faye, and she knew that the family was poor and sometimes homeless. So Helm saw these outings as not just a way to help James pass a standardized test, but excursions into the world to show James something outside the neighborhood where he lived. One time, Helm took him to a sit-down restaurant with waiters.
And we had a menu. It's just that basic task. he didn't know anything about. I remember his first time he saw one, he was so excited because he thought he got to eat everything on there. And we had to explain to him, no, teach him how to narrow it down. What do you want? What do you like? And, things of that nature.
Helm heard of James' death from a text message. She said at first she hoped it was a mistake. But then as she learned the story, parts of it sounded like the student she knew, and other parts were hard to believe.
I don't know if I ever got the true story, other than the fact of knowing that James ran his mouth, or James, I heard that James had a BB gun. So, again, you're talking about a kid that was a follower, not a leader.
When we come back, we'll hear from a teacher with more recent memories of James Means. We'll also hear from people who believe William Pulliam's self-defense plea.
Oh, that poor child, what a victim, oh, this is tragic. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think this is. I think that he was defending himself.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Before the break, we heard from Katrina Helm, who told us about James Means during his elementary school years. But Means was a teenager when he died, and I wanted to find someone who knew him more recently.
Where are you supposed to be? Who? So why are you on this direction?
So I went to James Middle School.
Yeah, he was in special ed. He was in my class too in special ed.
This is Wayne Casey. He taught James at Stonewall Jackson Middle School, and it's clear to me that James was special to him.
I'm struggling with talking about it now. Because, that was my dude. I had him since he was a little kid, so it's a little bit different.
Did you ever, go to the house and have
all
meals
the
and
time.
stuff like that?
All the time.
Casey would hand James a few dollars every now and then. One year, he even bought James an Xbox for Christmas. But he also helped him with normal, everyday things.
Take him to go get his hair cut, all that.
Apparently, he liked to have his whole hair.
I hated it all wild, so I just took him down to this street right here and got it cut so it could be trimmed up right.
I'd heard that at the tail end of his 8th grade year, James had been sent to an alternative school for kids with disciplinary problems. It's called the Chandler Academy. So I asked Casey why James was sent to Chandler. And at first he can't remember, but then it hits him.
Yeah, we did send him to Chandler as an 8th grader. We did, yeah.
Do you remember why?
He took a phone. He took a phone that he thought it was his. The custodian had a phone, and he took it out of her back pocket.
Casey says he thinks it was all a mistake. James was at school late, around 6 o'clock, when everything was shutting down for the day. That phone in the custodian's pocket, it had the same red cover as James. So he grabbed it. Casey thinks in the end it was a miscommunication, but still.
You can't touch an employee, regardless. You know what I'm saying? He should have asked her, hey, let me see that phone, and then it could have got solved like that.
But James didn't think that far ahead. Instead, he acted on impulse. As I walk out of Casey's classroom, I notice that there's a picture of James taped on the wall by the door.
Can we take a picture of that?
Yeah.
It's a picture of James with his afro styled just like he'd gone to the barber shop with Wayne Casey. I ask him why he put James' photo here.
We use that for motivation. Stay out, don't be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Stay out of the wrong place.
Right after the shooting, I went onto Facebook to see how Charleston as a community was reacting. There were a lot of threads of people venting their anger and outrage. But I noticed a comment by a woman named Jean Simpson. I went to meet her at the soup kitchen she ran at the time. It's called Man a Meal.
When I got on Facebook, it was multiple people that I've known and have known for years that were saying, oh, that poor child, what a victim, oh, this is tragic. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think this is. I think that he was defending himself.
Simpson grew up with Pulliam. She hasn't seen him in years, so when she read that he'd been accused of a crime, she was startled.
Wait a minute, I know this person, at least give him an opportunity, before everybody hangs him. Is the child really a poor innocent child? I don't know.
Simpson said she'd heard rumors that James and his friends were harassing Pulliam. And she doesn't think that this shooting has anything to do with race.
The kid could have been white and harassed that person that had the gun in the same way, and the same thing could have happened.
When I spoke to the Means family, his Aunt Teresa mentioned that 3 days before he was shot, James told her that an older white man had been bothering him. And heads up, she uses the N-word in describing the exchange.
James had already spoke on someone harassing him and calling them niggers and hassling them over there by his friend's house.
When she first heard that James had been shot, Teresa Means didn't remember this encounter.
We're thinking it was some kids. And when they said that it was Pulliam and they described him and they said it was an older Caucasian man and how the incident happened, that brought me back.
She doesn't know if Pulliam was the same guy who was bothering James and his friends. And so I went back to ask people like Billy Joe Payton, who knew Pulliam, if they would describe him as racist.
I feel that, racism probably played a role in the shooting. I think there's no doubt about it. Why Bill decided that he had to shoot first and not, if he had a disagreement with someone, walk away. He is an adult. He's in his 60s. He has, if he's guilty, taken the life of a young man who never had a chance at life yet, and his life is gone. His family is destroyed. And it's a tragedy, and it's a legacy, I think, of our racial inequality in this country.
I've been working on this story for the past 11 months, and I've struggled to get people in Charleston to speak with me candidly about this case. James Means' family was slow to open up because they were grieving. Pulliam's estranged family refused to be interviewed. Members of the black community were forthcoming, but they were somewhat circumspect, perhaps because they've seen how the news media tends to thugify young African Americans involved in shootings. A few people told me that they were certain that Pulliam's attorneys would use any information about James Means against him or his family in an upcoming trial, and they don't want to give them any ammunition. And then there's the white community. Billy Joe Payton is one of the few white Charlestonians I've talked to who's willing to confront the possibility that racism played a role in this shooting. Standing up to racial inequality can be a messy, uncomfortable business. And a lot of the white Charlestonians I spoke to, many of whom I've known for years, want to keep it at a distance. So in the end, Charleston will look to the courts to handle the situation, to decide whether William Pulliam was just defending himself or whether he flat out murdered James Means. But here's something to consider. Everyone in this town will be watching this trial when it begins in late January. And depending on the verdict, it might not be possible to keep the community's reaction to this case at a distance. James Means' family knows that Pulliam's defense rests on his fear that his life was threatened by James with a BB gun that looked like a real gun, and that this supposed fear could get Pulliam acquitted. James' 9-year-old brother Levon wonders whether fear really explains what happened.
My question is, he said he was scared. Even if he was scared of James, why would he shoot him twice? He could have shot him once. He shot him again. when my brother went up and was running, he shot him again. He shot him twice. Why? Even though he was scared of him, when he shot him the first time, why would he shoot him the second?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
I think that's it. I don't know how to answer it. I think it's a good question.
I'm still having trouble answering young Levon Means. I think it's a question that not just the jury, but the whole Charleston community is going to have to wrestle with. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our show was written and produced by me, Trey Kay, Ashley Cleek, and Mitch Hanley. Loretta Williams was the editor. Special thanks to Brianna Warner, Communications Director of the Kanawha County Schools. Michael Lipton and Tristam Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Krisafi and Mariana Trofimova provide us with images for the web. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.